Good afternoon. Okay, so if you've already seen me live today, it's because I already did a 40-minute live and I have been trying to upload it all morning and it keeps telling me that I already uploaded it. So I had tried to upload it after and then failed, and I think it says that it only lets you upload a live video one time. So it didn't go and it won't go, and so in order to keep our stitch along rolling, I'm gonna re-go live and hopefully get this done, and then I can post it to my page. And yeah, what a pain in my butt, but I don't want to keep you guys waiting any longer. So I'm going to do this all over again, and it gives some more people a chance to catch me live. Okay, so the first step right now for our stitch along is to do all of our prep. So that means prepping our hoop and picking up our supplies if we haven't. So if you have the PDF version of this kit, you have got pretty much everything I'm going to say all written out for you. So, and also if you have the kit version, because under the kit version, when you go to the digital file, you're going to see everything that I'm saying. But I'm just going to quickly run through it just for everybody who kind of wants to ask questions, or if anybody, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to be on right now, but I will answer questions and kind of give a little bit more detail if I can. But there is a lot of detail in that Essentials of Embroidery booklet that's linked at the bottom of your supplies page. So under like your shopping list, there's a little link there, and everything that I'm going to say is there. So, okay, our stitch along. We are going to do this hopefully a little quicker than I did this morning. I rambled. So we've got our two patterns. We are going to start with this little sunflower, and then next week we're going to be working on our wreath. So what we need if we are a beginner to embroidery, we're gonna need our supplies. So you've got a list. You need a hoop, your floss, you need a needle of some sort, and then you need fabric, and then we've got to transfer it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is floss. It's super easy. In your pattern guide, you're going to have a numbers list. That is going to be all of these little numbers here. So just every floss scheme you need for this pattern. If you do not have access to like DMC floss, there's color charts where you can like translate what this number means into like Anchor floss or other brands. I don't know a ton of other brands, but DMC is the one that I always use, so they are all there, and you can get those pretty much at any like crafty store, Joanne, Michael's. Lots of like quilting shops sell them. So hopefully you can find them pretty locally. If not, obviously you can grab the kit if you're wanting to still join us. Next up, we'll talk about embroidery hoops. So in all of my kits comes these beechwood hoops, but I know it can be difficult to find these if you're just trying to source things locally. So I love beechwood hoops mostly because they're really sturdy. They're smooth. They're less likely to like warp here just because they're a stronger wood. And then they have, the ones that I have and the ones that I prefer have like the screwdriver hole. I don't know why it's not focusing there. It's probably my crappy lighting. It's very dark here today. So the little screwdriver hole, so you can tighten them like extra tight, because my fingers can only tighten it so much, and then I can go in with a screwdriver and just tighten it even more. And that tight, like having your fabric tight in your hoop is going to be the key to like not getting that slack, which makes it harder to stitch, and then your whole project will like pucker. So we'll talk about getting our fabric into our hoop in a few minutes. But so our hoops, if you can only get the beechwood hoops, that's totally fine. I highly recommend like checking them all around to make sure that they're like not warped, closing them to see like, is everything nice and secure around the edges, looking for like any cracks or any like splintering in the hoops. And if you find ones that are like the nice perfect circle, because you'll find ones that are like awkwardly shaped that aren't right, and I mean that happens with all hoops, but typically with the beechwood ones it can be a little bit harder and they're a little bit more likely to miss shape. So did I say beechwood hoops? I meant to say bamboo hoops. So the bamboo hoops that you find at like a local craft store, a lot of the time those ones aren't as like strong of a quality. The beechwood ones are more likely to be like a heavier, sturdier, better quality hoop. But again, it's always about like what you can get your hands on and also what your budget is. Like these ones are a little bit more expensive. They last longer and they're easier to stitch with. But if you don't have it in your budget to go out and spend $5 to $8, you only got like $2 to spend on a hoop, that's totally fine too. Or if you're just starting out and you don't want to invest a ton of money and you just want to see if you like the craft, go for it. Just know that getting a better form or a better hoop option will improve your stitching if it's something you want. Like if you're like, you know what, I find it really annoying that my fabric always comes out of my hoop, that's something that you can solve with a little bit of better quality product. But also if you're, so just keep that in mind. The next thing, so we've got our hoops, we've got our floss, we need to talk needles. So in my live earlier today, I got myself totally confused even about needles. It's because they have numbers on them and I got myself all backwards and I said it all wrong. But there's a few different types of needles, and I think this is where it gets confusing, is like, how do you know, one, what size needle to use, and also like what brand to buy, which type to buy. There's so many different kinds. So I'll just go through a few of the different kinds. The first is obviously going to be an embroidery needle. It's not what I put in my kits. So an embroidery needle, we'll just talk about it quick. They are longer with a smaller eye. So the eye is the little hole where you're going to put your floss through, and they're sharp. So there's different sizes, but the eye is always going to be pretty small. Like if you look down to that size 10, which is going to be like your smallest needle, it's very thin, and the eye is, oh, I'm not in the frame, so that's not helpful at all. But the eye is like tiny, right? So you're going to be able to get 1-2 strands through that, which is fine, and they're great for if you're using 1 or 2 strands, but they're very small. It's very small. So it's a little difficult to thread sometimes, and I find for beginners that can be one of the hardest parts. Although if you're using 1 to 2 strands, that probably is going to be one of your, you are going to want a smaller needle, but we can talk about that after. So I don't typically use 1 strand. I typically stitch with like 2 to 6 strands, 2 being like my pretty well minimum. So I use size 24 tapestry needles. Now, the 2 main reasons I do that is because the eye is larger and they're dull. So they're sharp enough to go through fabric, but they're not so sharp that I can poke myself with these and it doesn't break skin, it doesn't hurt, it's fine. And I poke myself a lot. So I like to keep it simple for myself. I like the size 24 because they're a smaller tapestry needle. With tapestry needles, the sizing goes from, I think, 16 or 18, I think it's 18, all the way to like 26 or 28. 26, 28 being the smallest. So your bigger number is your smaller size. So 24 is getting to be one of the smaller of the tapestry needles, but I love how big the eye is, and I find them a good size. I know embroidery needles are a little bit longer, but that doesn't bother me too much because the smaller size embroidery needles are shorter anyways. So I think like a size 5 size 5 embroidery needle is very similar in length and width as a tapestry needle. The eye is just the biggest difference, and then obviously they're dull, not sharp. And then a chenille needle is identical to a tapestry needle except for it's sharp. So I don't use these a ton, but I do recommend them for if you're doing like a project with maybe like denim or canvas or shoes, because they're sharp, but they also have the wider eye, which is super like helpful for if you're using a lot more strands. And a lot of the time when you're stitching on like probably shoes or something, you're using more than 1 strand anyways. So these are awesome. So my recommendation, if I was going to recommend anything, is always the size 24 tapestry needle. I find them really versatile. You can use like 3 strands, 6 strands. Obviously 1 strand isn't like overly recommended, but I do it because I like to use 1 needle when I'm stitching. I don't like to switch it up. If you find yourself doing like a ton of different variety of stitching with like 1 to 6 strands, I suggest getting yourself like a variety pack. This one has size 5 to size 1. So, or sorry, size 5 to 10. So a size 5 is going to be like pretty good for like your 6 strands. You could probably use that. It would be great for like 3 strands. Size 10 is going to be like your 1 strand. But if you can see how small that eye is, it's going to be pretty hard to like thread 6 strands in there. So again, I use a lot of 6 strands, so that's why I go with the tapestry. So that is needles. Your kit comes with a size 24 tapestry needle. I think you can get a variety pack of tapestry needles too at like Joann and different shops. I don't have them in my shop, but that is an option. So we've got needles, hoops, talked about thread. Now we're going to talk about fabric. So fabric's a big one. There's always tons of questions about it, and I know it's hard. In Canada, we don't have as much access to like Kona cotton as you guys do in the States. And I know a lot of people, especially embroidery artists, always recommend Kona cotton. I know it's like the big one, probably the number 1 recommended fabric for embroidery. And I don't think, I'd forgotten you were starting tonight. So not prepared, but we'll watch later. Well, this is my second time going live. So this one hopefully will save to my timeline so you can watch it later, or else I'll be live all day, basically talking about this. Sorry, so back to fabric. I recommend Kona cotton just like every other embroidery artist because it's easy and it's actually a really good fabric. But the problem is in Canada, we don't actually have access to Kona the same way you guys do. I know that if you're close to a Joann Fabrics, you can get Kona cotton there. We don't have it at our Michaels and we don't have Joann Fabrics. So like places like quilting shops are really the only place to get Kona. Smaller fabric stores, maybe Fabricland doesn't carry it. So it's tougher for us. So I like to give some extra options here, especially for my Canadian friends or my people that live in small towns. You can always order Kona cotton online. I sell it in my shop only in, I think, 3 shades. I know some artists sell it in a bunch of different colors, but a lot of the time it's nice for you guys to just run out to a store that's local to you and grab what you need. So here's a few things you're going to look for. Oh, and also linen blends are a good one, but I find to source your own linen blend can be so difficult. You're going to go to a store, you're going to find a million different types of weaves for linens, and it's hard to know which is the right one. I know there's a few artists who sell bundles of the linen blend, and if you go on Etsy and put in embroidery linen fabric pack, you're going to find them, and some of them are beautiful and curated, but that one's one I wouldn't recommend trying to find out yourself. But for regular cotton fabric that we're going to stitch on, the things you're going to be looking for. Does it stretch? So every fabric when you pull on the bias is going to have stretch, but when you're pulling like with the weave, so if you can like see what I mean by weave, that's the direction of like the fabric crossing each other. So if you're pulling like with the weave, not on an angle like this, so like this, you're going to, you shouldn't get a lot of like stretch. It shouldn't stretch out. It shouldn't like pull like that. You should have a pretty sturdy fabric because you're going to be stitching through it. You can obviously stitch on anything like embroidery is, but for beginners and for like a project like this where you just want it on display, this is what I'm recommending. So something like you would find in like a cotton pillowcase would be the same texture, but you want like soft. You want a nice soft fabric, something like in the same weight as what you would see as like a broadcloth, but with broadcloth it's just rough. So a premium quilting cotton would be similar in like weight and structure to a broadcloth as far as like the stretch, but it's going to be softer. And the thing about it being softer just means that when your thread is passing through the fabric and the weave, it's not as abrasive. So anything that's rougher is going to be more abrasive, and you want to keep your thread like looking silky and smooth. Again, is it going to be like a huge factor if it's not as smooth or silky? No, probably not. Okay, so no stretch, nice like decent weight. So something like a heavier fabric, something that isn't totally see-through, but yes, you will be able to see through it so that you can stitch. But if it's super thin, it doesn't have the same like effect. You want it to look like thick enough that you can't see right through it, if that makes sense. What else? Oh, a tighter weave. So you don't want it to be too tight where you can't like pass through, but you shouldn't really be able to see the holes. Like an Ada that you would stitch on for, I think that's how you say it, for cross stitch, you can like see the holes and you can see the weave. This shouldn't be like that. So yeah, those are some of my suggestions. The key words for when you're looking for fabrics would be like premium quilting cotton, 100% cotton. Yeah, those would be like my recommendations. If you are looking for budget friendly, probably you could stitch on a broadcloth, which is always going to be like your least expensive option, but a premium quilting cotton, Kona cotton would be one of the brands, Free Spirit cottons, just like touch it, feel it. Does it feel soft and does it feel not stretchy and has like some weight to it? So those are my recommendations. It's tough to pick fabric. I think as you get going and you try more, buying them in like a quart, like just a little bit, like sometimes I'll just go in and I'm like 2.5 or 0.25 meters and I just get like a quarter, like a strip, and I try different fabrics and then I can know what I loved and what I didn't. Because you don't have to get fabric in a meter. I don't know if everybody knows that. I feel like people think they have to order it or like buy it in a meter. You can get it a lot smaller than that. And then, okay, so we've got our stuff, got our pieces. What's the word I'm looking for? Supplies. We've got our supplies. Scissors are another one that you can grab like some little scissor snips, but if you're just starting out, you can literally just use like any scissors you have. These are my kids' craft scissors. The nice thing about scissor snips is that when you have like a little thread at the back, you can really like get in there and snip. But I can also do that with these scissors. It's not like I can't. It's just, these are convenient and nice. I like them because they're like the suspension, so they like reopen themselves. I like that. I know that some people don't. So scissors, obviously you're gonna have something laying around the house. You've got your fabric, you got your hoop, you got your needle, you've got your floss, and then our transferring. So we're kind of past all the stuff you need to pick up or find around your house kind of thing. And now we're gonna talk about all the options for transferring. So I'll start with the one that I recommend and the one that we'll be doing for this. I already did it this morning on live, but that is the pen version. So in your kit, you will have gotten one of these Pilot Friction heat erasable pens. So it's literally just the pen that they came out with in the 90s where you could erase your pen marks. I remember when they came out and they were so cool because you could literally just erase. They're just stationary pens. But the friction from the pen eraser removes that, which is friction is heat. So when we blow dry or we iron this pen, it's going to erase the marks. So that's like someone figured that out. Someone in the embroidery or the quilting community figured that out and it was genius. So you're gonna just trace through. So you can do it just like up against a window. You can do it with a regular pencil, or you can do it with a heat erasable pen, whichever you have access to. And then you just literally trace. So a window is a great resource. I have this handy dandy light pad, which has like 4 settings and gets so bright and I can see everything through it and even like really detailed stuff. I love it. It's awesome. It was under $20 on Amazon. So if you are like already into your embroidery journey and you're looking to make it easier on yourself instead of using a window, this is one of my favorite things. I love it. It's better than an iPad screen. I know a lot of people will use the screen on like their iPad to illuminate behind them. I hated that. I know people will even like transfer from the screen of their iPad. Also hated that. I get it. It's easy. You don't have to have a printer, but I despised it. It always slipped around. So this is my favorite way. Again, the heat erasable pen, however you want to use it, window, iPad, like little lamp. Those are all the options for this kind of transferring. The other ones I'll go through really quickly. One of them is the adhesive water soluble paper. So this is like the adhesive paper that you print onto. It comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets. You peel it off, you print it off your printer, you pattern onto it, you peel it off and you stick it onto your fabric, and then you stitch through the paper, so kind of like an interfacing, and then you put it into water and it dissolves the paper, and then you're just left with your project. There's so many pros and cons to this. I don't love, obviously, having to have, like, this is disposable and you have to buy it and then you use it once. So it's like, I like the pen because I can use it a million times. You have to have a printer and do the printing thing. And that's another aspect that I don't think everyone has. So it's not as accessible. I also find when you're stitching through it, it's an extra layer of stitching. So it's harder to stitch through. You probably would have to use the embroidery or the chenille needle where it's sharp because it's thicker. And I have sweaty little fingers, and when it comes through, sometimes the adhesive from the sweaty needle will get onto this adhesive from this will get onto the needle, so it gets a little sticky. But again, this is a really great option for maybe people who like don't want to transfer themselves because it's a lot of tedious work. Maybe they find that they don't get the straightest lines. Maybe you have a really detailed pattern and you want to have like the perfect stuck on, like the design perfectly done. The thing I'll say is with this one, it's a little bit, because you have this like circle here, if you transfer this part of your pattern first, when we go to put it into our hoop, it's gonna stretch and it's gonna warp how you've like transferred that. So that we're gonna transfer this portion of the pattern, just the florals, and we're gonna leave this until after. And I'm going to show you once we've done all our stitching, once it's in the hoop, I'm going to show you at the end how we're going to do this part and how we're going to add our text. So that's further into our whole stitch along situation. Some other options would be like carbon paper, which you would put the piece of carbon paper down onto your fabric, and then you would put this on top, and then you're going to transfer like that and just trace out over your pattern, and then the carbon paper would like press down onto this and it would create the pattern there. Again, it's like super easy to use, especially for people who have struggle with like the tracing option. The only reason that I don't like it is because it's permanent, so you can't just get those lines off. Again, why I like the heat erasable pen. One of the last options would be like printing on a printer, which is really complicated, and it's really for like really intricate designs and or people who do this like a lot. It's you take an 8.5 by 11 sticker sheet, so a sticker page, and you stick it onto the back of your fabric so that it's like makes this like heavy and weighted, almost like a piece of paper, and then you run that piece of paper, which is actually your fabric, through your printer. So tedious. You have to have all these extra supplies. You have to like make sure that your printer is scaled properly. I just find it frustrating, and I've actually destroyed enough fabric for like a lifetime trying to do it. So I don't use that method for myself, but I see a lot of people using it. So if you're like interested in giving it a try, I know Stay at Home Artist, sorry. She has a JC. She has a tutorial on her Instagram. I know Stitching Sabbatical was one of the first people I saw do it because she does like these beautiful pet portraits, which are really detailed. But yeah, so those are some of the options. I'm sure there's even more that I haven't even listed. But again, I really like to stick with the simplicity. These pens obviously come in your kits, but you can also get them just like I can buy them in Canada at Walmart. I know they're on Amazon. Don't pay more than like $5 a pen. I think they're $4 on my website. I've seen them on Amazon for like $12. You can buy knockoff ones, which I don't love as much because they're harder to write with. They just don't have as nice of a ballpoint. But you can buy knockoff ones on Amazon in like 12 packs. They're not as good, but they do work. So again, on a budget, those are an option. I still will stand by the fact that these are better, but everything in my mind is what you're wanting to pay. So those are your options for transferring. Okay, so now we've done that. We're done all of the talk of all of the things. The last thing I'm going to talk about is nothing. I'm not going to talk about anything else. I'm going to just transfer. So you're transferring your pattern. It's pretty self-explanatory. We're just going to trace this out. Like I said, you can, but you don't need to trace out this part of your pattern right now. And we're going to work on the wording and what we want to put in our hoop once we're done our stitching. Because what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut our pattern out. Once this part is already stitched, we're going to stick it inside and we're going to trace here. One of the things I'll tell you, and you can actually see it if you look really closely, and this is one of the only downfalls of the heat erasable pen, is it does create ghost lines. So if you can see that right there, that's where I transferred it first, then put it in the hoop, and then when I was stretching my fabric out, it created this wonky line. It wasn't a perfect half circle that I wanted, so I actually ended up having to erase that line, and then I cut this out, stuck it inside, and I traced it. And we're going to do that same thing with our wording later, whatever you decide for like your text or your font or the inside of your hoop. I'm going to show you on one of our days of tutorials how we're going to do that. But for this line here, we're going to do it at the end. And the thing about ghost lines is that if you're not stitching like right next to them or close to them, they can be kind of obvious. So in this case, like you can see it right there, because this like ink doesn't actually disappear. It just changes color. So it changes from like black to white. In this case, you can see that it's kind of starting to reappear, but anywhere here in my pattern, like you can't see it, right? Because it's underneath of the stitching or it's so close to the edge that it's just not noticeable. But right around here where it's actually not stitched on top of, you do see the ghost lines. And that's why if we're gonna put something in the middle here, you don't want to have to erase it and do something different. You want to make sure that you've decided on what you're putting in the center there or where this line is going. So we are going to transfer. I'm not going to do it on live because you guys don't need to fully see me do this, but you're just going to do your transferring. We've talked about it. You're just going to do with your pen or with whatever method that you choose. Just going to transfer pen and paper, or pen and fabric, I guess. And then we're ready for tomorrow. After we have, well, I guess while I have you here. So once you've transferred your pattern, oops, you're going to want to get it into your hoop. So last step before tomorrow for stitching. And we're starting with this one. So you're going to want to get into your hoop. So you got your inner hoop and your outer hoop. Your outer hoop is your one that has the tension. So your inner hoop goes behind. And I've drawn these little dots on mine, which kind of help me keep it in the right spot. Just makes me know that I'm putting it in the center so that I'm not fiddling around with it too much. So I've done that. And then I like to loosen mine quite a bit. And then I slide it on. It slides on easier that way. I also, yeah, okay. And then you're gonna tighten your hoop, but while you're doing that, you wanna just pull around the edges gently as you tighten. So tighten a little bit, pull, and you're just pulling like that slack out. See where it's like kind of got a little bump right at the top there? I just want to pull that tight. And as you tighten, you're going to sometimes see more like bubbles form. You just pull it around. And that's what I'm talking about with this wreath. If you're pulling on a floral like this, you don't see where, like, it doesn't matter if you warp it a little bit, because it's like it's just a flower, right? They're not, unless you want like a perfectly centered, and then again with that you're gonna have to, so we're just kind of pulling. Sometimes if I do warp it too much, like that circle was kind of in a weird shape, I will use my fingers to kind of pull it back to the right shape, and then I pull evenly from all the sides, because if you pull in one spot, that's when you get, if I pull on one side and one side only, I'm gonna warp it. So just evenly pulling around the edges and then tightening as I go. And then you can use a screwdriver if you have one like this. I like to use a pair of scissors because I don't have a screwdriver sitting around. Another one of my lazy, so you can just tighten it. I don't necessarily always find, like, this is tight enough already without a screwdriver. So then you just want to hear that like drumming noise. You want the fabric to be tight enough that it sounds like a drum. And then you're ready. That's it. We are ready to stitch. So one of the other like little things I'll say is this piece of fabric's a little big for this. So I would trim this around the edge just so that when I'm stitching, I'm not catching my fabric the whole time. So there you go. If you, this is where I think I would just say like about 1 inch is the right amount to leave. Just gonna do it right now. All the way around. 1 inch or like, I wouldn't probably go less than that right now, but it'll help you. It's the first step to when we go to backing our hoop is trimming it. So there we go. All right, we are ready to start stitching. So I'll be back on tomorrow to stitch. This is gonna save to my timeline. I'm saying it right now. All right, thank you guys so much. What brand of hoop is that? They're ones that I order directly from a manufacturer. There are the Nerge ones, which some people hold in their shops. Those are pretty fancy ones. They do the same thing. I've had the brand. It's similar to those. So not identical because I order them directly from a manufacturer versus ordering them from like a branded company. So they're just like a beechwood, that's the like type. So instead of bamboo, they're beechwood, but they're not branded. Okay, we will see you guys tomorrow.